YVONNE Hudson, otherwise known as Mrs. Shakespeare. Not Ms. She's a married woman, right?
She is a married woman, yes. Although her husband isn't around a whole lot.
Not these days.
That's the story. That's the story.
Now, this is just a character that you've created and that you play, but you have quite a history in the performing arts. And we are here chatting with you today for a cocktail hour outside of the Henry Heyman Theater on Pitt campus. So what is your connection to Pitt?
Well, it's significant, and for Mrs. Shakespeare, because I came here to the Department of Theater Arts to work on my master's in theater, production, administration, with a focus on management. And the Shakespeare Festival that was here at the university for many years was going on, and I was the marketing and public relations director, but taking classes with Dr. Attilio Favarini, resident Shakespeare expert, and becoming more curious about Shakespeare's work and life. So during that time, I had an idea about doing a project around Shakespeare's wife, because I thought, well, she's kind of an unknown character. I was doing a lot of promotion. I would get calls for someone to go out and do a presentation, and originally the concept was that it would be a promotional piece that I could run out when the actors weren't around, not having arrived yet for the summer, to promote the Shakespeare Festival. So this is where my research started at Hillman Library and the Curtis Theater Collection, and some other significant places in Shakespeare's life as well.
Sure. So with this show that you have written and put together in which you play Mrs. Shakespeare, we're essentially learning about Shakespeare, the man, and his work through stories and readings from his wife. Is that correct?
Exactly. So what I've done with the piece over the years, it has changed. Initially, it was a little bit more of an educational, less episodic kind of piece.
And now it's more burlesque, right?
Now it's, yes, it's definitely on the burlesque side. A little lustier, as I say. Not really, no. It's always been family fare, but the original piece had a lot of singing. I was studying voice here at the university with Claudia Pinza, who was then teaching in music. So I had a lovely little recital of Renaissance and Shakespeare-related songs. Originally I had a lutenist who accompanied me, and the piece was fairly simple. Then over the years, as I revisited it here in Pittsburgh, when I lived in New York for 11 years, as I've moved around the Northeast a little bit, and come back to Pittsburgh, the shows continue to develop and change based on my research, my travel to Stratford-upon-Avon, some research that I did there. So it's been kind of a, as I say, a labor of love born of curiosity.
Oh, that's good. I hope you have that written down somewhere.
Yes, that's about the best way to describe it.
And there have been plenty of portrayals of William Shakespeare. I think plenty of shows written about him, but this, I believe, is the longest running show about his wife. Well, there are a few to begin with, and this is one of the longest running ones in existence.
In following those and what the competition is doing, if you will.
All those other dastardly Mrs. Shakespeare's
out there. All those other Anne Hathaways out there. I can see that I'm the one who's sort of stuck with her the longest. So I've made it my mission in terms of my research to keep up with any of the research, archaeological research in Stratford-upon-Avon, of course, where she lived and probably spent her whole life, in order to keep the piece accurate and current in terms of those references that I've woven in with my script and with excerpts from his works. So
Shakespeare's wife's name was Anne Hathaway. Now, do you find that she is often mistaken for the much less famous Anne Hathaway, who is currently acting in motion pictures?
Yes, so when you Google Anne Hathaway, usually the young actress comes up. Although I think she would make a good Anne Hathaway, actually.
Now there's a concept.
She would, yes. Anne Hathaway is Anne Hathaway. Anne Hathaway was probably born Agnes. She was the daughter of a farmer. And the Shakespeare and the Hathaway families probably knew each other. So there's a little bit of history and documentation related to her family. But one of the things that piqued my interest was that when I initially did my research, I couldn't find out much about her. Now you'll find a little more. Now when you Google Anne Hathaway, you will find references to me and my show, and I inserted some things in the Wikipedia article from my point of view, that type of thing. But she's not as well known.
Now, you are somebody who has, in some very literal ways, spent a lot of time in Mrs. Shakespeare's shoes. You've done your research, you've done this play, and I have to imagine have filled in a lot of gaps as far as her personality, what she was like, based on what you may have researched. So what can you tell us about how you portray this woman and how you feel that, who is she really?
Well, when I initiated my research, I was also annoyed that most of the scholars at that time, all men, didn't like her very much and were very dismissive of her and described her as surely being the shrew who had driven him to London and things that really had no basis whatsoever, in fact. So that kind of gave me some impetus to research her further. So what I decided to do with the piece was to look at their relationship in terms of perhaps how they met, how I suppose they might have met, and how they continued for so long despite these long absences that he had. Their marriage was 23 years long before he passed away, and he always came home. There was documentation that he came home because he bought them a house. After he was successful, he got his family a coat of arms, something that was important to people in those times as a status symbol, if you will. So we know that he didn't just disappear and desert her, despite other things he might have been up to romantically or infatuations he might have had, that also aren't absolutely documented in terms of, you know, being sure that's what happened in his personal life. So I decided that if people were going to come and spend about an hour with Mrs. Shakespeare, that they would need to not hear her railing so much about him the whole time, but get to know her better.
Sure.
And that it wouldn't be just about, you know, where is he, when's he coming home, I have supper.
A lot of people
table.
have come to see your show to escape that very thing.
Exactly.
I think it's wonderful that she is getting a voice now with this show that you're doing and lending that additional perspective to the life of Shakespeare. And we have a big anniversary coming up for Shakespeare himself, I believe next year, 2016,
right,
will be the 400th anniversary of his passing, his death.
Right, and we just celebrated his 450th birthday. So if you do the math, the next big anniversary kind of ends this period of several years where there's been a lot of additional attention to Shakespeare. When I opened my script to work on it again this time, that date of his death is at the top of the script. So it reminded me of kind of how I've tied those significant anniversaries into the piece. So over this next year, I'll be doing more with the piece and trying to fashion it in some different ways for educational offerings as well as performances and something for the big birthday and the big anniversary. Shakespeare died on the day that's celebrated as his birthday.
Oh, because I was going to say, it's not really flattering to have a death that's celebrated so much. But it's been a while since we've seen her in Pittsburgh.
Yes, I believe it was 2010. I performed it very frequently here at the University of Pittsburgh in the English room. The very first performance was in the Studio Theater when I was a graduate student. But the last time I performed it here in Pittsburgh was 2010, so it's been 5 years.
And April 18th, we have an opportunity to see her in conjunction with Prime Stage Theater.
I'm really thrilled because I think it's a great fit in terms of Prime Stage and their focus on literary pieces and plays that are, you know, based in literary works. So I was really excited when Wayne Brinder contacted me and asked me if I would do this.
There's a great promotional photograph of you as Miss Shakespeare that I've seen with the advertising. You're kind of sitting there, I think you have some books, and you're in the costume, you're kind of going like this. It's almost like, you better learn and listen to what I'm saying. It's great. It's compelling me to go, or else.
It's kind of like this.
Right.
And my Mrs. Shakespeare promotion, I use "mark my words," which is something my mother used to say. So whenever I was looking at trying to develop something that kind of captured it, and it was also a play on using Will's words, as well as some of my own, that's what we came up with. So that photograph kind of goes with that.
Do you think Shakespeare was a good lover?
Well, when we consider how he wrote about love, I would have to think so.
Now, although he could be one of those guys who was all talk. You've brought a little facsimile of your husband here.
We kind of have...
There are no small parts, just small actors, right?
And then I'm loving that we're having our conversation with him, you know, looking over our shoulder, but being very quiet while we're doing this.
Which is just how Mrs. Shakespeare wants it, right? Oh, honey, I'm sorry. I'm late for dinner. We had a long day at the theater. We're doing this Hamlet thing, you know.
Well, I have bought and stored the malt, collected the rents from the tenants, all before your instructions and your letters can arrive.
Oh, well, that's great.